everybody, and welcome. I wanted to introduce Andrea to you. And, is it right?
No.
No. Hey, you is going to come and talk to us. She is a mother of 6 children. Oh, I know. This is amazing. And she is a certified biblical counselor.
Mm-hmm.
And she is an exception. Well, she's an okay speaker because I don't want to put the bar too high. But so, come on.
Thank you. Thank you.
What age
So,
are those 6 children?
the children are 25, almost 23 by the end of this month, 21, 18, 15, and 10 years old. Those are the 6 children.
Wear a Wonder Woman t-shirt.
I love the fact that you're asking. The question, if you didn't hear it, was, do I wear a Wonder Woman t-shirt? And no, I don't. And that'll come up today in our talk. So I want to welcome you. We're going to be talking about the cooked spaghetti rule for stepping into your calling and understanding your gifts. There's a mistake in the title. And I realized that walking into the first seminar. It's the cooked spaghetti rule for understanding your gifts and then stepping into your calling. I wasn't really paying attention when I came up with that title. There is a slight incongruency there. We're going to be talking about understanding what's at stake and kicking the niggling feelings of inadequacy. And we're going to put that into 2 words. The first one is urgency. Urgency. And the second one is adequacy. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I have to give you a confession. I know what my gift is, or I know what my talent is, or I think I know what God is calling me to do, and I'm not living in it. So there's a little bit of relief for all of you who are just like, sure, I don't know. And the next thing is we're not going to go through the 20 questions to understand what your calling is. That's not how I work. If you want to do that, Google probably could help you. Find out what your talents are and so on and so forth. Just ask Google, how do I find my talents? And you'll probably find various questionnaires that can help you with that. Instead, we'd like to go through one of the 2 miracles that are in the Gospels, each and every one of them. So the one miracle that we know of that each Gospel brings to you is the death and resurrection of our Lord Jesus Christ. Does anybody know what the other miracle is that's in all 4 Gospels? It's the feeding of the 5,000. It's the feeding of the 5,000, and that's the biblical text that we're going to go through. Now, before we start with that, now that I've confessed that I'm not living my calling, and I'll unravel that for you as we go through, is a little story about a new suit, and I'm going to read to you about Billy Graham. When Billy Graham was 92 years old, he was struggling with Parkinson's disease. In January, a month before his 93rd birthday, leaders in Charlotte, North Carolina, invited their favorite son, Billy Graham, to a luncheon in his honor. Billy initially hesitated to accept the invitation because of his struggles with Parkinson's disease, but the Charlotte leader said, "We don't expect a major address. Just come and let us honor you." So he agreed. After wonderful things were said about him, Dr. Graham stepped to the podium and looked at the crowd and said, "I'm reminded today of Albert Einstein, the great physicist who this month has been honored by Time magazine as Man of the Century. Einstein was once traveling from Princeton on a train when the conductor came down the aisle, punching the tickets of every passenger. And when he came to Einstein reached in his vest pocket and he couldn't find his ticket, so he reached in his trouser pockets and he's starting to look all over the place. And it wasn't there. He looked in his briefcase, but he couldn't find it. And he looked in the seat beside him, still no ticket. And the conductor said, "Dr. Einstein, I know who you are. We all know who you are. I'm sure you bought a ticket. Don't worry about it." Einstein nodded appreciatively, and the conductor continued down the aisle punching tickets. And as he was ready to move to the next car, he turned around and he saw the great physicist down on his hands and knees, looking under his seat for his ticket. The conductor rushed back and said, Dr. Einstein, don't worry. I know who you are. It is not a problem. You don't need a ticket. I'm sure you bought one. Einstein looked at him and said, young man, I too know who I am. What I don't know is where I'm going. Having said that, Billy Graham continued, see, the suit I'm wearing, it's a brand new suit. My children and my grandchildren are telling me I've gotten a little slovenly in my old age, and I used to be a bit more fastidious. So I went out and bought a new suit for this luncheon and one more occasion. You know what that occasion is? This suit is the one in which I will be buried. But when you hear I'm dead, I don't want you to immediately remember the suit I'm wearing. I want you to remember this. I not only know who I am, I also know where I'm going. Today, we want to learn how to live with that kind of assurance and to live with a purpose and a calling, as Mr. Graham also did. So if you have your notebooks or anything that you're keeping notes in, I would love for you to open up a double spread. On the double spread, on the left-hand side, you're going to do the same thing as you have on the right-hand side. So I want you to do the same thing on the one side as on the other side. And I will draw what I want you to draw. Don't worry. It's not going to be a lot of art. What I basically want you to do is to put your page into quadrants. On the left side, 4. On the right side, 4. And was it this morning when Natty said, no, it was yesterday evening when she said we have 3 different spheres in our life. We have the public life, we have the more intimate life, and then we have the secret life. We're not really going to go into that, but I want to pick up on the secret life. And the secret life is going to be down here.
On the left or the right?
Bottom left. Bottom left, the secret life.
So this one quadrant should be on one page or
This is all on one page. And then on the other page, the exact same thing. And on the other page, on both pages, in the bottom left, you're going to put secret. Above that, we have Jesus or the mentor, with a caveat that the mentor is not going to be perfect, like Jesus was perfect. Next to that, we have others, which could be family, work, church people. People who wonder if you wear a Superman shirt, right? And down in the bottom right, we want to have a space where we have God's point of view. And as we go through the story of the feeding of the 5,000, I want the left-hand page to be the page where we just basically go through some of the things that are going to be in each of these squares for the disciples. And you personally might say, I actually like Peter, so let's just have a look at Peter, and what I think he's going to be impulsive, I think he's going to be whatever his character is. Or you can just say, I think the disciples were clueless, so I'm just going to do them all together as a lump sum of people who thought, like, I'm here for famous, I'm with this Jesus guy, I can do really cool things, and so on and so forth. So we're going to unravel that. And on the other side, if there's anything that you recognize for yourself, like, these are secret things I think about myself. Usually they're negative, like I can't do that. I should not be asked to speak on a seminar at a women's conference about talents and gifts if I can come up here in front of you and say, I'm not living the truth that I think God wants me to live. There's a problem there, right? I'm a fraud. I am not capable. So we all carry these kind of secrets with us. Oftentimes they're negative. I'm not capable. I can't do this. I can't, whatever. Or it's like the disciples could have been saying, like, well, what was it? Peter, who said, oh, wash my whole body if you're not going to wash my feet, right? So it's like I will be with you even if they're going to kill you. I'm going to be with you right into the death. And then I don't know him. I don't know him, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on here. We think we're going to be true to Christ, maybe, right? Or we're very much aware of our sinful nature. So that's the right side of the page. If anything you figure, oh gosh, that kind of touches me, you can fill that in for yourself. Or after this weekend, when you go through your notes again, it's like, yeah, this is who I am, this is where I am. At the end, we will collect a lovely list that you guys can continue for the rest of your earthly life to fill with God's point of view on who you are and what you're called to do. So we're going to look at John, and we're going to read from chapter 6. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the miraculous signs he had performed on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover feast was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy food or bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he had already in mind what he was going to do. And Philip answered him, 8 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each one to have a bite. Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up, "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far will they go to feed so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and the men sat down, about 5,000 of them. Jesus took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed those to those who were seated as much as they wanted, and he did the same with the fish. And when they all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over, leaving nothing to be wasted." So they grabbed them and filled 12 baskets, conveniently one for each of the disciples, and with pieces of 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people who saw the miraculous signs that what Jesus did, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who has come into the world." The cooked spaghetti always starts out as an uncooked spaghetti. It's the nature of spaghetti. And what can you tell me about this piece of spaghetti? It's brittle. It's also straight, right? And sometimes we think if God gives us a calling, it's just going to go from A to B, and it's going to be pretty straightforward. Is your life straightforward? And your calling probably isn't either. There's something happening here with this. Our lives aren't as straightforward as this, but we would love our lives to be like raw spaghetti, which is, can you eat that? I mean, as a kid, you would chew on it, right? But it's not tasty. It gets stuck in your teeth. It's not fun. You're not going to get the pure enjoyment from the raw spaghetti. But if we have cooked spaghetti, if we throw our spaghetti into there and we cook it, what happens? What happens? Well, it's soft, but it's also tangled. It's no longer like nice and straight, is it? Is this more like your life? It's more like mine. Things are complicated. Things are not easy. I'm not a Superman. I'm not a supermom. And to step into my calling is not an easy thing. I don't think it was an easy thing for the apostles, and I'm so thankful to God for scripture that shows us so many non-straightforward stories. We started in the Old Testament yesterday evening with the story of Hezekiah, not necessarily straightforward. This morning, David, I identified with David this morning. I'm like, maybe it's only a 15-year wait until God allows me to step into my calling, right? Maybe that's what it is. And I'll tell you, my calling, what I believe God is calling me to do is to hold space for families that are dealing with transgenderism, specifically married couples. It's a hard thing to deal with, and it's a hard thing in society where church is seen as judging and where the world is seeing as, you be you, just do that. In the marriage, if one of them is struggling with gender dysphoria, both of them are struggling with gender dysphoria. The children are struggling with it, and they may have no idea what they're struggling with. Now, I have no idea how to start this. God says there's going to be some sort of a retreat center, like this maybe, where there are cottages where whole families can come in and say, we need to take a sabbatical from our work. Could be a half a year, could be a full year, and we need to figure out what this is, how to navigate that. Some of the marriages would go separate ways. Some of them would be restored. And I would be so happy if I could clean the toilets in a place like that. I would be so happy if I could be just even doing that. But I don't know of any ministry that does that. It doesn't exist. And I'm happy to be the toilet cleaner. It's not like I'm going to go and say, okay, ladies, we're going to all pray and you're going to collect some money so I can go buy a nice piece of, like, that's not what I feel called to do. I just feel called to join that. It's going to be somewhere and I'm going to hear about it and I'm going to be there and I'm going to volunteer to do the dirty work because that's fine with me. So sometimes you're being called to something big or very specific, and you don't know what the next best step is, how to move in there. I got a lot of stuff in here that's telling me, like, you can't do that. You know, mother of 6 children. I am not a super mom. You can just talk to any of my children, especially the teenagers right now. The older ones, after teenagers, they actually start to turn nice on their parents. So they might actually have nice things to say about me, but talk to my 18-year-old. Going to be a different story, right? And there are things that if you have children, you regret. Well, in life, there are things that you've done, said, not said, that you regret. We all have that. Even if you look at someone and say, must be an amazing person, there's going to be things like that. Let's look at our characters. We've read the text for our latecomers. We're reading from the feeding of the 5,000, the miracle of the 5,000. And I want to look at this secret part. What do you think the disciples could have been thinking, harboring as thoughts in their minds, according to this text? Impossible? Dreamer?
No resources.
Yeah.
How are we going to get the money? How are we going to get the food?
Yeah, there's no calling an Uber to bring over a couple of pizzas from the pizzeria, right? No resources, right? Anything else? I can't, like, I'm here. Doubts? Yeah? Like, I am here.
And I gave up everything to follow this guy, and what in the world?
I was not to be the toilet cleaner. Why am I in charge of getting food? Right? Right? That's not my job. Not my job. I'm better than this. Whatever that might be.
And maybe fear of a hungry crowd.
Well, yeah. What if we can't feed them and they get like a riot? Like, right? Riots, hungry mob. We can continue along. There's a lot of things there that we can continue. I think you understand what I'm talking about. It's those things that we just sit there and we immediately start to discredit ourselves for, like, there's no way. I can't hold this seminar. I can't in integrity stand in front of you and say, this is what you need to do to live your calling. That's a problem. You know, you have to bring it out right out the gate. So I put Jesus and a mentor up here because in our story, we clearly have Jesus. And in our stories, we have Jesus, but we also should have mentors. Let me tell you this, not a single, I'm going to bet, like I'm willing to bet, I don't know well, I shouldn't bet, but I mean, I'm willing to bet that none of us got here without the help of someone else. And I mean, not just here, I mean to faith, right? To faith. And I'm going to assume that you guys all have some sort of faith, because I said if you're not ready to move forward in faith, this isn't for you. Maybe you were just totally curious and you don't have faith, and we can talk about that afterwards. But my assumption is that we all have some level of faith, and I did not come to my faith by myself. I'll tell you this, my wisdom is not nearly enough to get me to understand that Jesus Christ died and rose again, and that had an impact on my life, that has a meaning for my life. I needed people to talk to me. So Jesus and the mentor are those people who are like, this is the sticky situation you're in. How are you going to feed the people now? Right? And they're like, I don't know. And then they do give an answer, and he's like, okay, I'm going to tell you. You get in to sit down, and let's move through this story. Those people in faith who help you to move through your story, help you to mature in Christ, help you to understand the next level, the next right thing where you should be moving. So Jesus here, he's challenging their worldview. Right? The worldview is you cannot feed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. That is not possible. It's not possible, right? And you cannot feed 5,000 people if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you don't have any other resources. So what else do we have here? What is Jesus doing? What is he helping them with? Where is he challenging them? Organizing things? Okay.
Testing their faith.
Yeah. Testing faith. He's also teaching them. He's teaching them about his power and his ability. Teaching. So you can continue to fill that in with things that Jesus or a mentor would do. That's someone who is further along in the story, who's capable of nudging you along in your faith where things might seem to be just totally dire or absolutely impossible, or I don't know what the next right step is. I wish for you all that you have someone in the faith that you can move with, But that's not all. You are that person for someone else. I hope. In your church, in your community, in your life, there are people who are not as far as you are. And you don't have to be perfect to do that. You can be the mother who just screamed at her kids 5 minutes ago. I haven't talked to my kids, but I mean, I could be that woman, yes, but still turn around and show another woman how to just navigate this season of younger children, to listen with compassion, to actually allow them to grow and move and mature together, right? So each of you, you don't have to be a mother. Each of you, though, are spiritual mothers to somebody. This is something you need to be yearning for. So we had at the beginning, there were 2 things. The urgency or understanding the reason why. Like, why is it important to understand your talents? Because none of us would be in this room if somebody before us didn't understand that urgency. And then that urgency wasn't because they were compelled to talk about God. No, it's because they had compassion on them. Jesus, it says here, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them. When Jesus came ashore, he saw a large crowd. He felt deep concern for them. They were like sheep without a shepherd, so he began teaching them many things. So I was a sheep, and somebody had compassion on me, and I want you to see the sheep in your life and have compassion on them. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. You don't have to feel you're called to minister to families who are dealing with transgenders, and that's a big thing, right? And I'm not doing that right now, but I'll tell you what I am doing. I'm doing the next right thing of the thing that's in front of me. I have a 3-year-old that comes to my house. Carol knows her. She comes to my house 5 days a week. This child is teaching me how to be a mother. I mean, if I had her 25 years ago, I might have been a better mother for sure. This child is joy, pure joy, and she is teaching me so much on how to engage in the day. It's the next right thing. She's a refugee child. I just basically said, hey, I'm at home. I'm happy to take care of your child till she hits kindergarten. So both the parents go working. This kid has learned perfect English. The mother refugee, right? So they're coming from Turkey and Syria. They do not speak English. The child will only speak English with her mother now. That's an aside. But the point is that what's that next right thing? And from that, I've started teaching refugee women how to speak German 3 days a week. I can speak German. I can teach refugee women how to speak German. That's the next right thing. What am I learning in that? I am learning how to communicate better. If I can teach someone who doesn't know our alphabet how to read, if I can teach someone who's never been to school and written or read anything how to speak a new language, I am learning a lot, but I'm having a blast. These women are amazing. So what are you doing with your days? The context and the urgency, again, that we were talking about is before Jesus took the boat across the sea and then up on the mountain, having compassion on the people and started teaching them. If you look in chapter 5, or in the previous chapters in any of the other Gospels, you will learn that John the Baptist has just been beheaded, which is why Jesus leaves with the disciples to have a rest and a breather. This is heavy news. The news that we have, and the reason that we're sitting in this room, was super heavy. People were losing their lives for this. John was beheaded. Jesus came knowing he'd go on the cross. That wasn't an easy decision. 9 times out of 10, or maybe even a better percentage for us, we're not going to die that kind of a death. Right? Our bodily lives will have an end at some point or the other. And even if we're giving it all for Christ, we're probably hopefully not going to be nailed to a cross or beheaded for our faith. Right? There is a cost, but maybe not as dire as that. There is an urgency. There is a world of people dying to know that their brokenness has a purpose and there's a Redeemer waiting for them. The other side of John, of feeding the 5,000, and I want to read from verse 25 in John 6:25. Before that, in between that, Jesus walks on water. It's one of those miracles he does. And we get to Jesus is the bread of life. So we're continuing the carb theme. Spaghetti is carbs. The bread of life is carbs. When they found him on the other side of the lake, they asked him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" Jesus answered, "I tell you the truth, you are looking for me, not because you saw miraculous signs, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. Do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. On him, God the Father has placed his seal of approval." And then they asked him, "What must we do to do the works God requires?" And Jesus answered, "The work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent." So they asked him, "What miraculous sign then will you give that we see it and believe you? What will you do? Our forefathers ate the manna," bread, "in the desert, and it is written, he gave them bread from heaven to eat." And Jesus said to them, "I tell you the truth, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives his life to the world." "Sir," they said, "from now on, give us this bread." Jesus declared, "I am the bread of life. He who comes to me will never go hungry, and he who believes in me will never be thirsty." When we celebrate communion in our church, we read, "This is my body broken for you." And it is usually bread. "This is my blood given for you." And it is something to drink, right? So the carbs are really important. We are people who eat. We need to sustain ourselves from the good food. But we feel like the disciples, totally inadequate. Jesus comes and he asks a question of Philip. He says, "Where shall we go to buy bread for these people to eat?" Was that a rhetorical question? Did Jesus know the answer? Yeah. So here's the thing. He's asking that question. Why is he asking that question? He's asking the question. He's testing them, right? It says in the next line, actually. That's a giveaway. He asked only to test him. That's the next thing. The power of questions are so powerful. When my oldest was 3 years old, so I only had 2 children at the time, I made a dinosaur cake for her cousin who's 7 months younger. And the cake was up on the countertop, which would have been about this high. And what you see along the bottom of the dinosaur cake is like a part of the icing is just missing, right? Now, if we do this as an adult, we're smart enough to smooth it over so that nobody knows that we've been tasting that. My husband says, "Talita, did you run your finger along the bottom of this cake?" And she said, "No." And I looked at her and I said, "Talita, did it taste good?" And I got a different answer. The questions we ask are important. How can we ask the type of questions that get us further? Ask God questions or let God ask us questions. God has a habit of asking questions. He asked a question in the Garden of Eden. Does anybody remember what that question was? Where are you? Did he know where they were? Yeah, they were covered in leaves. How foolish is that, right? The leaves are going to deteriorate. They're compost, right? They're not going to... Anyway, there's also in 1 Kings a story of Jezebel and her husband was beheading or killing 949 prophets, and there was one prophet left. Do you know who that was? Elijah. And Elijah was scared. And what did God ask him? He asked him, "What are you doing here? What are you doing here?" Because Elijah was kind of like, I'll just hide out over here and not do. So you might be feeling like God is calling you to something scary, like I am. And you might be wondering like, all right, how can I keep myself busy? And maybe, in fact, I know there have been seasons in my life where I've kept myself busy with good busy. Where's good busy work? It's good busy. I'm a mom of 6 kids, right? So there's a couple of stories that I can tell along there. There's a good reason why I'm not doing this or why I'm not doing that. But I want to ask you one question, another question. And the question is, what do you think is the most valuable real estate on earth? Tell me. New York? What did you say?
No, I didn't know.
You don't know. Anything. Just, it doesn't matter. You're probably not going to guess it, but just tell me one. Vatican City. Okay, good. That can't be cheap. Dubai. Where did that come from? Back there. One back further. I was looking in the right direction, just not. Dubai. Another one.
The grave.
Who said the grave? Yeah. It's the grave. Hello? How many dreams die in the grave? How much potential is buried in the earth? How many people took their good intentions, their gifts from God, with them to the grave? How many were afraid and didn't know how to feed the 5,000? Look at this. Feeding the 5,000. At the beginning of John, anybody know how John starts? John 1:1? It's a Sunday school answer. All right, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And how does Genesis start? And he spoke the Word. He spoke everything into being. So we understand that Jesus created everything. Did he need this kid who brought his bag lunch and said, if this can help, you can do something with it? Like, he could do anything. He could have manifested a feast right there, right? With cooks and whatever. He could have just said, it's happening, right? It took him 6 days to do the earth, right? And he rested on the 7th. Could have happened. He didn't. Instead, he chose to take the lunch of a kid who was there. The most insignificant person in this story. So if you feel small and not adequate to do something, I'll tell you this, that's one of the stories you're telling yourself in the secret thing. And we need to move over to what God's point of view is, right? In this story from feeding the 5,000, God's point of view is like, it's okay. You just put him to sit down, it's going to happen, and you watch and learn from me, right? God's point of view is he teaches us many wonderful things. What does God teach us? And I'm going to start us off, and I expect you to shout it out there what you get. So let's look at Ephesians 3:20. Does anybody have that memorized? Now to him, able to do immeasurably more than we ask or imagine, to him be the power and the glory. Philippians 1:6. That's right. He who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. Can we agree that for all of us here, it doesn't matter where you are in your faith journey, God has begun a good work in you. And we need to recognize that we're not finished. So it's okay to not know the answer for the next step or how that thing's going to actually happen. I don't know how I may never end up cleaning toilets. Well, I always clean toilets. I'm a mother of 6 kids. But I mean, in the context of what I feel I'm called to do, right? But he who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. You're a work in progress. You do not have to have all of the answers. Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 to 33, for me, is, what did I say, 14? 22 to 33. Sorry, that's not very well written for you. That's Jesus walking on water. There's just crazy things happening. And we need to anticipate or have that faith that allows the unthinkable to happen. The conversations that I've had just since the last seminar, just by saying that I'm interested in working with transgendered families, and at the level of the toilet cleaner, not as the savior of these people, but just to be involved in that ministry has already opened up some really cool conversations and some potential opportunities. That's walking on water. That's anticipating that somehow or the other, I'm going to be able to walk on water with this. Because I trust that Jesus didn't give me this idea just so that I could hold this seminar and say, I'm not doing it yet. Right? What about Isaiah 52:7? How lovely on the mountains are the feet of them who bring good news, proclaiming peace, announcing news of happiness or glad tidings. We all know that. Somebody gave us the good news. Someone brought that to us. And if you think about it, most of us will have a concrete person in mind, or 2 or 3 people in mind who took a season and invested in us, right? We can be that for someone else. And we need to understand that those people who did it for us may not have even been as far along in their faith as we are today, right? None of us are completed. He's working on that. Do you guys have any more? I got 4 more, but I don't have to bring mine. What are truths that God sees in us or shares with us that we can always call to mind to at least outweigh these things? What are they? What are your favorite encouraging verses?
Mine is be still.
Be still and know that I am. And that.
You don't have to run out there and do this.
Yeah.
Just let me. I'm God.
That's right.
Be still.
Be ready. Right. And that's, where is it?
I don't know.
Psalm 46:10. Be still and know that I am God. I wrote something down from Natty's session this morning. Or no, I think from the singing. Did we not sing a song this morning? when the race is complete, still my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but Christ through me, right? So we can get our knickers in a knot because we notice that our lives are not straightforward. We got the cooked spaghetti going on over there. Everything's like a big hairy mess. I got 6 kids. If you want to know about hairy messes, come to my place. There's a lot going on, and I'm just trying to keep my head half the time, right? Anything that I might accomplish by the end of the day, yet not I, but through Christ in me. I've got a few things more still written here, but I think I'm going to leave it at that. Oh, I didn't mention this the first time. Did anybody get this card when you got here? And it's German. Does anybody speak German here? Got a few people. So it says here, durch die mächtige Kraft, die in uns wirkt, kann Gott unendlich viel mehr tun, als wir je bitten oder auch nur hoffen würden. It's the first one up here, right? Do you remember what that was? It's okay, you don't have. Yep, Ephesians 3:20. That I have to look it up too, so don't worry about it. Even though I just immeasurably more than we ask or imagine. But how does it start? Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more. I thought that was great to have that. What a great promise that we have. As we wrap up, I have one more quote. Let me see if I can find it. Oh yeah, I wanted to end on Darwin. Isn't that the right way to end a good Bible at a Baptist conference? All right, so Darwin said, a man who dares to waste 1 hour of his life has not discovered the value of life. A man who dares to waste 1 hour of his life has not discovered the value of his life. Ladies, we should be living our lives so that we die empty. And we should be living our lives so that we are spent. There was one Bible verse it was the last sentence in what this seminar was. And it was from Philippians, and it was from Paul. I am being poured out as a drink offering on the sacrifice of your service of faith. I don't know when I'm going to die. I sense that I got a lot to learn, so it's going to be a while. But honestly, I may not wake up tomorrow morning. And I want to know at the end of the day, I'm spent. I've just given it all that I had today. And I don't want to say I'm spent for video games or for Netflix series or for pleasure. I want to say I'm spent for looking at people in the eyes and saying, you matter. God sees you. He knows that you're struggling. But you can take that struggling and you can help someone else along the way. There's always going to be someone who will profit from that. There's always going to be. He who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. It's the same for everyone. Those people who helped me, those people I'm helping, they need to know that. They need to know that. He who began a good work in you shall be faithful. So as we are spending our lives and just giving of ourselves, I am quite fascinated by the fact that I wasn't planning. I was actually, I think I was the last one who was asked to do a seminar here. Actually, if we're honest, Carol told me someone else was planning on coming and they jumped. So they were scrambling to get someone else to do it.
That's not what I said.
That's not what you said. But that was me reading between the lines, right? Okay. But the point is that I honestly, I don't believe I was one of the first that they asked, which is fine. I don't blame them for that. And at the beginning of this year, I had a handful of books that I wanted to read, and so I ordered them and I got them. And then Carol says, actually, we were wondering if you could talk about gifts. And I'm like, who is we? Who asked this? Not because I don't believe Carol. Carol and I go to the same church. We do happen to know each other. She's eaten at my house. I've eaten at her house. Like there's a relationship there. But I'm like, who was asking? Like someone specifically was asking. And I found out who was asking, and I called that person up and I said, tell me what you were thinking. What are you What are you doing on that weekend? Help me to understand, help me to move it. And in the meantime, before I got to talk to that person, I'm reading the feeding of the 5,000, and I'm like going, this is not the talent story that I'm thinking is going to be what we should be talking about. But at the same time, I couldn't shake it. Talking about the talent story, that's the real easy one. Where, one guy gets 5 talents, the other guy gets 3, and then the other one gets 1. There's 3 possible ways that story could go out for each individual, but we're only told about 2, right? Failure is not an option. The first 2 invested the money and had more and gave it back. The third one just said, well, I just went and I just binge watched Netflix and I didn't do anything with it. I buried it. I knew you were harsh. So I thought if I could just give you your 1 back, we're good, right? This is not the faith we want to live. But none of them invested the money and failed. Failure is not an option. We can feed so this would be under this one. Failure is not an option. That's a principle that we see in that parable. Failure is not an option. Because we got this guy who's capable of manifesting a meal out of nowhere, but also conveniently taking the least significant person in the room or at the crowd with his brown paper bag and his bologna sandwiches, his 5 barley loaves or whatever they were, and the 2 fish, and to do something with that. So when we're thinking that we're inadequate, we have to acknowledge that God is beyond adequate. So I'm talking to the person who suggested me was Natty, and I'm asking her, and she's like, oh, this is what we're going to talk about. And I'm like, oh, gee, that actually kind of fits into what I was thinking of. And I ordered a couple of books. One of them was called, Rejection Proof. Have you ever heard of that? And I don't have the name of the guy. It's like Izzy something or the other. He's, I don't know if he's Asian or African. I don't know. Rejection Proof was a guy who was so frustrated with his life that he just decided to have total ridiculous whatever. 100 days he would do something that he knew people would reject him. Like I would walk up to you if I was doing this and I'd say, Carol, can you give me 100 euros? And you'd be like, no. Right? So it's rejection. It's to learn how to be rejected. And I thought, I need to learn that because I'm like a snowflake sometimes. I have a tough udders, and you may not see that, but we all go home and it's just like, oh my gosh, they didn't like me, right? So I'm a snowflake. I thought that was an interesting principle concept. Another one is called Goodbye Things. And that was really interesting because he's just teaching you how to throw things away. And I only read like the first 30 pages of the book. I got the gist of the book. You don't have to necessarily go get it to read it to know that like it was about throwing things away. It's about the minimalist lifestyle. And I didn't read the whole thing. I had gotten everything I needed out of it. But it was very interesting because when I started to develop this and I started to understand, and the next book I read was Die Empty, meaning I have given it all. He's a Christian. Die Empty by Albert B. Almore. A really super easy, simple book. The subtitle is Take Nothing to the Grave. If you want to read something, and he goes through, I don't know, there's like 10 or 12 chapters. I'll just read the chapters. Well, they won't make, I'm not satisfied, they're waiting for you, master it, make it count, active ingredients, the paralyzer, the meeting place, the shoulders of God. And each chapter is like 5 pages. Super easy to read. Super inspiring. And it's not going to say you should be doing children's ministry because you have 6 kids. It's not like that. It's just how to be a maximizer, how to die empty, how to cultivate the sense of urgency even in the face of your inadequacy, how to step into that. Die empty. Take nothing to the grave. The world is dying. We profited from somebody who decided that they would mention something to us, and others are waiting for you. So if you know what your calling is, that's great. Start talking about it. Like I did here, start talking about it. Someone might know something and just bring you along or whatever, or just say, hey, you need to talk to Andrea. She's interested in that. If you don't know what your calling is, talk to your mentors or to those who are further along in the faith. There's going to be someone in your church. I mean, if you're anything like me, you're not the smartest one in the room, right? There's going to be people there that can give you, they can come from this circle and they can reflect things on you that you don't see about yourself. For example, I would say I'm not a teacher. And I'll tell you this, when I read the credentials of the other 3 women doing the seminars, I'm like, what am I doing here? Right? And life is like that at times. And that could be part of my issues down here. It could be just part of their wishful thinking, supermom. It could be anything along this line. But at the end of the day, we have to live out of this quadrant of understanding what God's perspective is. And I have to trust. Like when I first started speaking, I could read fine. And now I have to have glasses and I lose myself in the text all the time and that makes me nervous and all those kind of things, right? I just have to trust that God's going to show up and do the things that I have to just give that power up and just say, okay, like I've done the preparation. If anything good is going to come out of it, if only one person sitting here takes something out of this, then it's a good. I've done what God expected or hoped or planned to do, whatever. I mean, I'm not doing anything anyway. God's doing it. And if he's doing something with you, respond to that. Talk to people about it. I don't believe there's anybody here who's the only person from their church, right? So you can start talking about it here. And if you are the only person of your church, then start talking about it here because these women will pray for you. They will pray with you. They might follow up with you if you're willing to share.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you are seeking your calling. Do we have different callings at different times? Because you were called to be a mother of 6 children. That is a huge calling.
I think, to be honest, that we are all called to follow Christ. And and the Westminster Catechism is like the thing. I don't even have to go beyond this first statement, and that is our purpose is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. That's our calling. That's our calling, and that will allow us to, that joy, enjoying him forever, will allow us to engage with other people. And so yes, being a mother of 6, but I never wanted to get married and I never wanted to have children. So I didn't even understand that calling to begin with, right? So as the children come along, or as the man comes along and says, will you marry me? You just take steps of obedience. It is at the end of the day, and for me, if I'm like David and I have to wait 15 years, I might be halfway through. If I have to wait 15 years, I still have to do the next right thing, right? I need to learn how to throw the slingshot, right? For me, it's okay, just learn how to communicate, or be willing to be vulnerable and stand up here and say, like, I'm not living my calling, or whatever other thing that might be vulnerable in that sense. Yeah. Dinner is in 20 minutes. We're officially finished. If there's any other questions, there were no questions last time, so yes.
Talking about gifts, how did you know what God has gifted you with?
I have been working in a ministry for women whose husbands are transgendered, and the stress and the whatever. So there was a burden there already. And somewhere along the line, just the dots started to get connected for me. And it's very specific. But as was mentioned beforehand, a mother of 6 kids, you're called. You know what I mean? Sometimes your circumstances just put you right there. So sometimes there's a thing that's out there that you're moving towards. And sometimes it's that thing that's right here. It's right around me that I'm moving towards. So if we look at Natty Tully, she's married to a pastor. She wasn't a refugee person necessarily, right? Or the hospital experience that she explained. All of a sudden we had a hospital ministry. And if you follow her on social media, what they've been doing since the war broke out, situated in Bucharest, with a network of churches that they've been working with, but also having come from Moldova, which is even closer, right? They've been doing runs back and forth. They've been mobilizing the church. They've been doing all kinds of, was she called to do that? No, but she understood, or maybe she understood though, the next right step. That's all you have to actually know. You don't have to get tripped up over, I might die and never have anything to do with transgender families in that sense. I gotta be cool with that on the one hand. On the other hand, I would love to be involved with that, right? So it's not something I'm hopefully not doing an Elijah, just like, what are you doing here? I hope that God doesn't find me in that situation. It's quite simply doing the next right step. So let me just say one quick, short prayer and send you ladies off. I want to thank you, Lord. I want to thank you for the example that you give us through Jesus Christ and through the disciples. And I want to thank you for the real truth that we sometimes just don't understand where we're going. And our life does not look like raw spaghetti, but cooked spaghetti. It's just a mess, and we don't know how to untangle it. I pray that for each one of these women here, that you would help them to see the next right step, and that they might be encouraged to do that. We expect you to show up for the rest of the weekend for us and show us new things, teach us, and hold us so dearly. Thank you for each and every one of them who've come. So precious, Lord. We pray this because we know your Son, Jesus Christ, is with you and has power, and it is in his glorious name that we thank you. Amen.
Amen.